Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and while you're at it, click the bell to be notified of future videos. Today's block is called Helen, finishes at 12 inches. Here's our diagram. We have plain blocks in the corners. We have two sets of 4 flying geese. One set is inside the small star, and the other set is along the outside and the side units. And we have more plain block in the center. Here are 4 blocks set block to block. Let's look at the patches. Patch A is a 3-inch finished square. We cut 3.5-inch squares, and each square is a patch. So we'll need 4 patches of the background fabric and 1 patch of the dark fabric. The 4 patches of the background go in these 4 corners, and the 1 dark fabric goes in the very center. Patch B is a 1.5-inch finished square. We cut our squares 2 inches for 1 patch, and we'll need 12 patches of the background fabric. And this patch B are in the side units here on the outside, and they're also inside this star block in the corners. Patch C is a 1/4 square triangle that is 3 inches finished. To get that, we cut a square that's 4 1/4 inches. We cut it in half twice, and we get 4 patches. These 4 patches. We'll need 8 patches of the background fabric. So to get our 8 patches, we'll have to cut 2 of these large squares and cut each one in half twice. Then we'll have 8 patches. These are used for the geese portion of the flying geese units. There are 4 flying geese units on the very outside of these side units, and there are 4 on the inside. They're parts of the star points of this star in the center. Patch D is a 1.5-inch finished half square triangle. We cut 2 3/8 inch squares and cut them in half once for 2 patches. So we'll need 8 patches of the background, 16 of the light fabric, and 8 of the dark fabric. These are the sky portion of the flying geese units. And the sky portion are these small half square triangles on the sides. So we have the flying geese are on the outside, and they're on the inside as well. And this will all become clearer once I lay everything out, and you'll see it. And our last patch is patch E. It's a 1.5-inch by 3-inch finished rectangle. To get this, we cut 3.5-inch by 2-inch rectangles, and we'll need 4 patches for the light fabric. And these rectangles go here in the side units just underneath these flying geese units. The AccuQuilt dies are listed underneath all of these instructions. So I have instructions here, the cutting instructions listed by fabric. So we'll start with the background fabric, and here is how you cut your A patches. You'll need to cut 4 3.5-inch squares. And for the B, you'll cut 12 2-inch squares. And you go on like that for the others. Now for the half square triangles and the flying geese, I've given you options. For the flying geese, 4 at a time. You can cut 2 at 4 1/4 inch squares, or you can cut each square in half diagonally for 8 patches. This means you'll just sew the patches together. And the same thing with the half square triangles. You have the choice of doing half square triangles 2 at a time, or you can cut them in half for patches, or you can cut larger squares to make half square triangles 8 at a time. And in this demo, we'll be doing the half square triangles 8 at a time. And the same thing goes with these other 2 fabrics. And you'll see that as we go along. Now let's look at our fabrics and how they fit in with the cutting instructions. This is patch A, the large square that goes in the corner, and it also goes in the center of the block. This is patch B, the little squares that go around the blocks. These are patches C and D. This is these two are patch C and these are patch D. We're going to make our flying geese units 4 at a time. So we need this is the geese part of the flying geese, and these 4 squares are the sky part of the flying geese. And same thing with this. We're making 2 sets of 4 flying geese. And these are the squares we've cut to make the 8 at a time half square triangles. And then this is the rectangle patches. So let's start with the flying geese 4 at a time, and we'll do 2 sets of this. So here's a short tutorial that shows you how to do this. For flying geese 4 at a time, you need 1 large square and 4 small squares. The large square is the geese part of the flying geese, and the small squares are the sky part of the flying geese. On the back of each of the small squares, draw a diagonal line. Place 2 of the small squares, like this, on the large square, right sides together. You line up these edges and make sure these lines line up. Then you're going to stitch 1/4 of an inch on both sides of that drawn line. Here are the 2 stitching lines on either side of the marked line, and now we cut it in half on the marked line. Now you'll open these up and press your seams open on both sides. Cut off the nubs. Now you'll place another square in this corner. Here's your diagonal line, and stitch on either side of the diagonal line. And do that for both of these. When you're stitching, your stitches should come out or start right at this point, this intersection here, this 90-degree angle. Cut this in half on the diagonal line, and you have these 2. Press your seams open and cut off your nubs. And do the same for this one. 4 flying geese. I needed to add before we cut these, if you've cut the D patches larger to trim down later, when you sew these together, use a true 1/4 inch seam allowance. If you are using the exact size and you don't plan to trim, then use a scant 1/4 inch when you piece these together. Now we're going to trim ours down because we cut the C patches the exact size and we only cut the D patches larger. This measurement, the width measurement, should be 3.5 inches. And we're going to trim this down to 3.5 inches across and 2 inches up and down. So let's put our ruler down and first measure our width, and it's really close. There's a little bit I might want to trim off, just some of these little jagged edges of the 3.5 inches, and then match the 2-inch line at the bottom of this geese portion down here. Make sure that the 1/4 inch mark on the ruler is right at the tip or just above the tip of the geese portion. And then trim this. Now just trim off the rest of the little nubs. And do that to all of your flying geese units. Now we're going to move on to our half square triangles 8 at a time. In the instructions it tells you for each square you'll cut 1 at 4 3/4 inches for the exact size, or cut it to 5 inches to trim later. I intended to cut mine 5 inches, but I guess I just messed up, but I cut mine the actual size. So I won't be trimming down later, but that's still the same process. So what you do for a half square triangles 8 at a time, normally you mark these lines on the back side of the light fabric, but I did this wrong. I did this before I needed to trim it. So anyway, we're not using the light side now. You can see these lines. I've got diagonal lines going across. The last time I demoed one of these 8 at a time methods, I just marked the diagonal lines and stitched on both sides of each diagonal line. Then after you're finished, you trim on the horizontal and vertical as well. but you'll see that when we do it. So what I decided to try this time is I marked the diagonal lines and I went ahead and marked the horizontal and vertical lines. That way you don't have to worry about it once it's pieced. You can just cut on the lines you've already marked. So we'll see how that works. If you want to try this method, you definitely have to mark the diagonal lines. This is what we're going to use to stitch. But also if you want to mark the halfway point, if you've cut them 5 inches, then it will be the 2.5 inch mark. But if you cut them the exact size like I did, the half will be 2 3/8 inches. Okay, now you put these two together, right sides together, match all 4 sides. Then on both of these diagonal lines, we're going to stitch. If you've cut your squares larger, you stitch a true 1/4 inch. I cut my squares the exact size, so I'm stitching a scant 1/4 inch on both sides of this diagonal line. Then I'm going to flip it and stitch on both sides of this other diagonal line. Right now the horizontal and vertical lines, we're not using them right now. Okay, I've zoomed in so I can show you the stitching. Here's the diagonal line. Here's the stitching on this side and this side. So let's follow this diagonal line to the center. And you'll see it has continued up this way. And you'll also see the other diagonal line has the stitching. If we go this way, you can see. And you see the horizontal and vertical lines have not been stitched, but they're on there. And you can see these lines are pretty much going right where they need to, intersecting these crossing lines here of stitching. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to cut on every marked line. The diagonals, cut like that, and then the vertical, and then the horizontal. Now let's see what that looks like. Since I marked them, I don't have to measure right now. And I'm picking up, I'll show you how I pick up my ruler. So I don't want to move this piece after I've cut it. So I'm going to put my finger on this side just to hold it in place, and I'm going to lift the ruler up with this, like this. And you see how I can just kind of pivot it and it's not touching the fabric. So I pick it up and then move it. I'm going to put it on this diagonal line now. So you just real softly sort of place it where it belongs and cut. So then I'm going to lift this up again and move it to where I have to move it. See, I can't even see which ones I've done yet. Done this one. I need to do, I've done them all. So there we go. Now we have our 8 half square triangles. We open them up. These need to be trimmed to 2 inches after they're pressed. Our flying geese units and half square triangle units are all done. Now we're ready to lay the block out on the proppet board. This is the center A patch, and we'll leave these till later. Then next we'll make the star in the center. And I'm just looking at the diagram, so you follow the diagram. And we're making this center star with our flying geese units that match. And we'll fill in these corners with the B patches. Oops. And now we'll do the second round. And this is where we can add the A patches in the corner. We'll do most of the corners. There, you can hardly see those. Now we're going to fill in the side units. Start with these rectangle patches. Now we'll put the flying geese for the outside patches. Now we'll fill in with the half square triangle and the squares, and they go like this. These make sort of this little crown or flower shape. Now fill in the rest of these B squares. Now I know some of this is hard to see because the background matches this. But what we're going to do is if you separate these, and you can piece this unit here. I'm going to pull off this unit. So this is what we'll stitch first. And I'm going to stitch these two together and these two together, press those seams, and then stitch these three pieces together. Now I've got these two pieced, and I wanted to show you when you stitch these two together, the flying geese onto the rectangle. Put the flying geese on top when you sew. That way, as you stitch, you can see where this point is from the flying geese, the geese part. You want to stitch above that. You don't want to stitch on that point because then your points will be cut off. Once you press that, the point will be right on the seam line. Now I'll press these three pieces and stitch them together like this. And then we'll finish that side unit and do 4 of these. Now we'll just put these units in their place and work on the middle star. This star here is actually just 3 rows. So we're going to stitch the top row together, this middle row, and the bottom row. Press our seams and then stitch the 3 rows together. Okay, I moved it off so you can see a little bit better. All the pieces are done. This is the center star, and it's pieced just like a regular block. And then our side units and our corner units. Now we'll just simply sew this row together, this row, and press those seams, and then sew the rows together. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and while you're at it, click the bell to be notified of future videos.